All right, thanks people, thanks for coming. There were 260 people invited on Facebook, and another probably 60 people, and I don't know, maybe it was a mistake of trying something at 6 o'clock on a Friday, but anyway, it is what it is. We march on. So,
these are like really super influential people.
Yeah. We're the best. We're the best of the group. So
I was getting there. You want to get up here?
Sorry.
It's okay, I need to work on my hot flares. So, anyway, so thank you. I met Anthony when Jonathan, his partner, lived on Elbridge, and he came and knocked on our door, and we met and chatted, and already started to be getting involved in United Neighbors of the 35th Ward, and stuff that I can tell you about later, if you're interested. But the big thing to me is having been involved in connected politics for a long time. I pulled the lever for McGovern back in '72 with my mom, took me to voting. And so there's always been a connection that's ebbed and flowed. And, fucking Reagan years in the early 80s in college and all that. But the United Neighbors of 35th Ward's got a lot of young bloods, and what's really exciting with that generation that's coming up is they don't live in the shadows of the Cold War, so the boogeyman of socialism isn't a thing. In fact, the boogeyman is becoming more and more apparent that it is actually capitalistic. So, I'm pretty excited that our alderman is a democratic socialist. But what does that mean? I mean, it's still pretty ambiguous. And to me, it's taking a look back of like what did particularly Chicago politics look like and ward politics. The alderman was like the feudal lord, like the duke, who has a lot of power for giving out money and zoning variances, and so it attracts people who are corruptible, just like the feudal system. So it ultimately then turns that position into a commodity, which is capitalism. So how do we change that? We need people whose priority is not money, but people. That's what socialism is. It prioritizes people over capital. So that's good. The democratic part is that it's not an autocratic system, which we've seen people take socialism and go in the wrong direction with it, is maintaining listening to the people. And that's what I love about Carlos. And this is ultimately an introduction to him, is that Carlos has embraced that process. So when there are developers in the ward who've come and said, hey, Alderman, we need a zoning variance because we want to do this development, and he looks and sees that this development is some big piece of shit that everybody's going to be like, no, enough, there's enough pieces of shit that we can't stop. So if you need my help, you need to talk to the community and get their involvement in the process. And I sat in on a community meeting that Carlos brought together, and the developer had spent a year working with neighborhood groups and came back to the table with a project that obviously worked for them because they're in it for the money. So it didn't stop development. They were able to do a project. They took a building that had been sitting empty and was an ugly piece of shit, and are turning it into something that's got some affordable housing. It's not going to change the way the neighborhood looks by making some big monstrosity kind of thing. So, and that was all through the democratic process. So the priority was the people, the process was democratic, and it can happen. So the last thing I'll say before introducing our awesome alderman is Ronald Reagan was a piece of shit who lied to us and said that, the government's the problem. It's not the problem, it's the tool. It's our tool, it belongs to us. But it's been dominated. They've told us that so people go walk away from it, and then it gets taken over by the people who will sell themselves, who will embrace being a commodity for their own benefit, and they sell us out. So we have an alderman who won't sell us out, and so I introduce the alderman of 35th Ward.
Good evening, you all. I'm so glad that was recorded. because Mark just did an amazing explanation
Yeah.
of what I stand for, what we believe in. It's all about a government of, for, and by the people, right? Making sure that we have a government that isn't for sale to the highest bidder, right? Where decisions that are going to impact our communities for generations to come aren't being made behind closed doors with not your interests at heart, but the interests of a rich and powerful connected few. It's all about making sure that we have democracy, right? That we have the ability for people to come together and collectively discuss and make decisions for what they would like to see happen in their neighborhoods. And we've been able to do that now in the 35th Ward for the past 7 years, believe it or not. I was just speaking about how I remember knocking this door when I was running 8 years ago. Had a lot less wrinkles back then. In that time, what we've been able to do is we've been able to develop community-driven zoning and development, which is a community-driven process where, as Mark just explained, residents come together with community groups. They sit across the table from developers and negotiate with those developers to say, okay, you want to build something here, you want to extract profit from this neighborhood, what does our community get in return, right? How can we make sure that there's affordability? How can we make sure that you're helping to promote small businesses? How do we make sure that the building is going to be an asset for generations to come for our neighborhood? Developers don't like it because they just want to cut a check to the alderman and then get whatever they want to do approved. But after that initial negotiation process, there's a community meeting. And sometimes we have community meetings attended by 12 people to discuss a zoning change. Sometimes they're attended by 600 people, which was the case with the Emmett Street affordable housing development just down the block by Kedzie by the Logan's River West, where 600 people came to that meeting and said, absolutely, yes, we want the zoning change to move forward to be able to build that 100-unit affordable housing development that's now built, and we're going to be cutting the ribbon on May 20th. So that is what democracy can deliver. That's what can happen when neighbors come together. And I'm so excited to be here tonight speaking with all of you in support of Anthony, because over the past 7 years, when we've been working to bring people together, when we've been building coalitions, when we've been looking to help people in need, integral to that work in the 35th Ward office consistently has been Anthony. In the wake of Donald Trump's election, when we started to organize hundreds of neighbors to respond to the threat of our neighbors being deported and being threatened with ICE, one of the main people that were organizing those meetings, bringing people together, was Anthony. When we needed to help our neighbors who were experiencing homelessness and help them find housing, the person that was doing that work was Anthony. And I can tell you that there are homeless veterans that Anthony knows on a first-name basis, and I should say they're not homeless anymore because Anthony helped to get them into housing over weeks and months of working with them, to get them their paperwork, to get them their documentation, to get them off the streets. There are thousands of people, yes, let's applaud that. There are thousands of people that Anthony has helped in so many different ways. And when I look at our Cook County Board of Commissioners, and I see the great responsibility that they have on making sure that we have a Cook County hospital that's functioning as a robust social safety net for people that need to turn there, when I see the important role that the Cook County Forest Preserve plays for people to be able to have a place to do recreation, have family gatherings, to go jogging, to go for a hike, when I see the biodiversity there, when I see the role that Cook County Jail plays and the Cook County courts play, right, when people get in trouble, I know that the Cook County Board of Commissioners is someone that needs someone like Anthony. Someone who has that background of bringing people together, of building coalitions to advance our community's shared compassionate values. So without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce the man of the evening, Anthony Quezada. Please give him
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here this evening. Thank you Mark for helping put together this event. Mark has been,
Brian
as well. Where are you at, Brian?
Brian,
I don't see you. Oh, there you go. I was like, you pointed over there, I was like, where's Brian?
I'm little.
Elisa, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Mark is our photographer, our campaign photographer. So Mark has been following us around since late January, snapping photos for us. We have them on our mailers, we have them on our website. So thank you so much, Mark, for your incredible labor, and Brian. And also for that amazing analysis in the beginning. I was like, yeah, Mark, that's actually right. Like, oh yeah, that's right. But But yes, my name is Anthony Quezada. I've had the pleasure of working with Alderman Rosa for the past 6 years. I've also been a community organizer for the past 6-7 years. I was born and raised in Logan Square. I'm the son of immigrant parents from Mexico and Costa Rica. My mom's name is Maria Hernandez, my dad's name is Joel Quezada. I love them very much because they instilled in me at a very young age the compassion values that Carlos was talking about. A story that I've told every once in a while is this one time my mom took me out to go buy groceries, and the clerk was scanning the items, and the clerk gave the total to my mom, and my mom looked at the total and said, hey, you know what, can you take these items off? I can't control that. So the clerk took out the items, and we took what we could, and we walked out of the store, and a homeless gentleman asked my mom for money. My mom went into her wallet, and she took out $10, and she gave it to him. And I remember thinking at that moment, like, wow, I thought we didn't have enough money to buy the food that we needed, but my mom still had solidarity and compassion for someone who needed help at that moment. And those are the kind of lessons that have always guided me. I think it's also because I was raised Catholic, so I've just had that kind of intrinsic love for people. But early on in my childhood, unfortunately, my family experienced poverty. My mom became unemployed when I was in high school. My dad lost his job, who was our only financial supporter. And at a very young age, I knew that there was a level of injustice that was impacting folks like myself and my community. Logan Square at the time was going through massive levels of displacement and gentrification due to luxury housing buildings like the one at Milwaukee, California, the Mika Towers. I don't know if you've ever seen those buildings. My story with that building is that at the time that I knew that I wanted to help folks like my family out and my community out, I actually interned for an alderman at the time, in the first ward. His name was Alderman Joe Moreno. And this was my first foray into public service and government. And I wanted to learn how to help my community. And so during this internship, I got to learn about the alderman. I started hearing rumblings that the alderman wasn't acting in the interests of our community. And so one time I went to this community meeting, same kind of community meetings that our alderman has when there is a proposal for a new development or a zoning change. And at this meeting, it was about 150 people. And every single person at this meeting said, we do not want this building. And one person, one of my neighbors, actually stood up and said, Alderman Joe Moreno, I heard that you took $10,000 from the developer Rob Bono to change the zoning or decision and to build this building. And he said, I will cut you a check right now for $10,000 if you deny the zoning change and you don't build this building. And people got up and they applauded. And this is one of my childhood neighbors. And I remember thinking at the time, like, whoa, there's something wrong here. Like, that was a seismic shift in the trajectory of my life, perhaps, actually. Because at that moment, I knew that the alderman was acting against the interests of my community. My community knew that that building wasn't going to be built for them. It wasn't going to be built for the poor and working class immigrants that lived in the community at the time, and that it was going to serve the interests of folks who could afford that. And I remember walking out of that meeting, and I was with the alderman at the time and his chief of staff, and the alderman turned to us and said, we have to hold off our decision, our approval of the zoning change until after the election. Because if people find out now, it's clearly really unpopular. And that is the kind of corruption of our public institutions that Mark was talking about. Right? Think about it. The alderman was taking money from this developer, which already is a conflict of interest, huge amounts, he was taking tens of thousands of dollars. Then he was lying to the public, and he was also going against the public's interest. There was 150 people there. Not one person said, I love this thing. The only person who was saying that was the developer himself. So I remember when the alderman said that, I actually ran home to my mom, and I was like in tears. And I was like, I'm working for the wrong person. I'm like with the wrong crew, I'm with the wrong people, and I cannot do this. And I didn't show up to work until like 3 days later, and actually walked in there, and I went up to my supervisor, and I was shaking, I was trembling, and I was like, is the alderman here? And she was like, yes, he's in his office. So I marched into his office, and I just started screaming at him. And I was like, Alderman Moreno, like, you're a traitor, you are a liar, you're like a thief, you have stolen from our community, you are impacting us, all these sorts of things. And I said, and I'm going to run against you one day, or I'm going to get you out of office. I was 18 at the time. And I was like, I'm gonna wait 3 years. At least when I'm 21, I'm gonna run against him. But I was furious. I was furious. Because at the same time all these shenanigans are happening, my mom is struggling to pay rent. We're hiding, we literally hid from our landlord because we didn't have money at the time to pay our landlord. So, and here is this alderman who is taking huge sums of money to build luxury housing, right? We're talking about $1,600 studio apartments, and we are struggling to pay for a 2-bedroom, $800 apartment, right? There's clearly a huge, gap between the realities of our community and what we need and what the priorities of this alderman was. And so from that moment, I had been looking for a political home. I've been trying to figure out how I can actually make a difference in my community because I couldn't do it through the alderman. And I slowly got my way into organizing, to community organizing. And it was actually when the video came out of the murder of Laquan McDonald and the level of police brutality that was shown in that video, it really, really got me involved in the movement for Black Lives at an early stage, and I was really interested in that. But then the campaign for Bernie Sanders happened in 2016. And that's when I met Alderman Rosa, and we actually went out to Iowa together and we started canvassing. And that night we had a dinner, and the alderman asked me, why I was interested in government and politics. And I basically recounted to him, my experience, my story, being the son of immigrants, experiencing poverty, seeing corruption in our government. And the alderman said, let's get back to Chicago and let's organize together. And we've been organizing with our organization, United Neighbors of the 35th Ward, since then. It's a lot about my background. I'm getting somewhere here. And luckily I've been working in the ward office for the past 6 years, been organizing for the past 6 years, and I've seen the kind of impacts in our community when it comes to housing affordability, the lack of mental health care, right? Wealth and income inequality. And I've seen the way that this impacts people day to day. But I've also seen the failures of our government system, not having the resources to provide for people in those situations, right? People who are struggling to pay their rent, people who are struggling to pay their property taxes or to buy groceries. There just isn't the kind of the system in place, support system, the public safety net to provide people with those resources and services. And I know it firsthand. I literally help people day in and day out trying to navigate the bureaucracy. And especially under COVID, I just saw those impacts go through the roof, right? People crying on the phone because they lost a loved one or they didn't have a job anymore. And I looked at our current leadership at the county board, and our current county commissioner, his name is Luis Sorolla Jr., in his tenure as a commissioner, he has served as a corporate lobbyist for a lobbying firm that actually contracts services with the county, which is a conflict of interest. He's essentially legislating and fighting for funding for a contract that he is lobbying for. It's all sorts of mess. And now the commissioner, the lobbying firm, and the company are all under FBI investigation. The commissioner has also taken a job with the Department of Water Management, which is a job that should go to a working person. So he's now collecting 2 paychecks from 2 government bodies, which I think is corrupt as well. But most importantly, he's not been a leader. He's not been a champion for progressive causes, for affordable housing. He's been completely absent. He does not provide the kind of services that people need. While campaigning, I've heard a lot of different stories of people who said that they've called his office, they've emailed his office, and they've not gotten responses. So on every single level, as a public servant, he has completely failed. And if I were commissioner, and when I am commissioner, I will be a champion for our communities. I will fight for the kind of progressive change that we need. I will be a very accountable and accessible public servant. And I know how to run an office like that. The priorities that I would like to fight for that that Carlos slightly touched on is to make sure that our county hospitals and clinics are fully funded, to make sure that we're prioritizing affordable housing, that we're fully funding services for homeless individuals, and that we have a Green New Deal for Cook County. And what I mean by that is that we're protecting and expanding our natural resources, like our Cook County Forest Preserve System, while also creating green jobs, and also investing in renewable technologies, divesting from fossil fuels, and then lastly, I also want to make sure that we're fighting corruption, clearly, right? Because if people are going to have trust in our government systems, they need to know that their public officials are not taking money from the same companies that they're legislating for. And I want to make sure that we're banning the kind of corporate lobbying that our current commissioner is a part of. And so I have complete confidence that I can walk into this job and do it well. That's why I'm really proud that we have built a very broad coalition behind our campaign. We have the support of many independent political organizations on the Northwest Side, labor unions, and elected officials, and we're doing very well. We have the momentum behind us, and we're actually 45 days away from Election Day. So having these kind of spaces today where you get to learn about me, about this campaign, and what we're fighting for, is crucial to getting us to that victory line. So thank you so much. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you. Any questions?
Who are some of the people and organizations that endorse you?
Alderman Rosa. I was actually recently endorsed by Congressman Chuy Garcia just last week. The state representatives of the area, Will Guzzardi, Delia Ramirez, some state senators, Omar Aquino, Robert Martwick, the Illinois Nurses Association, the Cook County College Teachers Union, and other progressive organizations like United Working Families, Chicago DSA, the People's Lobby, and a bunch of neighborhood ward organizations. Yeah.
What's the sort of geographic area encompassed in where you'll be committed?
Yeah. So the 8th district goes as far east as Western Avenue and Logan Square. Then it goes south to like Division and Humboldt Park. Then it goes north to Montrose and Irving Park in one section. And then as you go west, it comes down a street, I think it's Pulaski, and then goes west on Irving Park. So that's Portage Park, Belmont Cragen, portions of Dunning, Schorsch Village. So it goes all the way west to the edge of the city. So as far east as Western, and as far west as Harlem, south to Division, north to Montrose.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a very large district.
And you're out canvassing that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. And we're going door to door. We've knocked on over, I think, 30,000 doors at this point. And yeah.
And you feel things are going well in your progress.
Yes.
Because you got an incumbent and I've seen some advertising, so the incumbent's finally coming out and doing some advertising.
Right. So we actually conducted a poll. You folks know what a poll is? Have you ever gotten one of those? You've ever got one of those calls where they're like, if an election was held today, who would you vote for, right?
Yes.
So we conducted one of those polls, which is very pricey. And what we found out is that we are the strongest challenger in this race. And I'll give you one little statistic number from that, and that is only 15% of people believe that Luis Arroyo should be reelected, deserves to be reelected.
Wow.
He's very unpopular. When I've gone door to door, people who know him do not like him. They do not want to see him in office. And the people who don't know him don't even know what a commissioner is. So it's a really great opportunity to engage in that kind of education. And a lot of times I don't fault the person. I said, actually, if you had an active commissioner, he's had 8 years to make himself known, to let people know about the importance and the resources and services at their disposal at the county level. So again, it's another example of his failure as a public servant.
When was the last time doesn't he chair the labor committee?
Yes, so he's the chair of the labor committee, and they haven't had a meeting since 2018. All the while, there have been workers who've gone on strike for safer working conditions, for better pay across Cook County. So if I were the chair, I would have held hearings on the conditions of workers at the Cook County hospitals, at the clinics. I actually spoke to one nurse who, where was she working? In Austin. And she actually quit her job because she said that she saw too many people die. And that she knew, and she herself was overworked and her coworkers were overworked. And I was standing there like, that's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. And she said there was no support, right? That it was like pulling teeth when trying to get some support from commissioners, which I think is absolutely horrible to think about, that our healthcare workers are going through that, during a global pandemic. So it is a failure again on his behalf that as the chair of the labor committee, he did not listen to the workers who were sacrificing so much.
So I'm curious about, you mentioned the Cook County jail system, and what kind of coalition amongst commissioners exists, or what kind of initiatives exist to improve Cook County Jail, which is just a mess. It's like the largest mental health provider in the county, right?
Yeah.
Like what kind of changes have been proposed or that you would back?
Yeah, there is some folks right now who I'm thinking about is Alma Naya, Brandon Johnson, and even the county board president, Tony Precknickle, have worked on efforts to address mass incarceration, to make sure that we're not allowing folks in the county jail to be the largest provider of mental health. So I definitely want to work with them to figure out how we're not keeping people in jails and prison for low-level crimes. I know we also passed the Pretrial Fairness Act in Illinois, so we're eliminating cash bond. So I want to make sure that people who are poor are not being held in jail because they can't pay to get out. So I would definitely support and defend initiatives like that. But I think we need to do some more work with other organizations to figure out what kind of work we can advance when it comes to restorative justice and criminal justice in Cook County. But I definitely don't think that police and prisons are going to keep our community safe, right? We need to make sure that we're investing in our communities. And so I think that also means coordinating with city and state officials to figure out how we bring those resources into communities, like more mental health clinics and services.
So the last portion of an event like this is the ask, and I said that I would do it. I mean, it's not the last because there's food to eat. But first, I want to give a big shout out to my neighbor and new friend, Jesus, who volunteered for Mother's Day. He moved in at COVID, so basically we've been porch neighbors. Like, hey, anybody sick over there? No, good, yay. Nobody's healthy. We really haven't been able to hang out too much. I mean, tonight's the most. But he was just, I was like, what are you doing on Friday? We got this event. Come on down and meet some great people. I was like, want some food?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's donated, insisted on donating our food. So Joyce, you talk. So thank you for that. Usually in these things, there's a big who could do $10,000? Raise your hand. Like clearly, I know most of you. So, and also you need a bigger group to get that kind of mojo going. But just as a point of reference, mailers, single mailer is about $10,000. So that's where that number comes from. But the biggest ask, which doesn't cost any money, is time. And there's a lot of doors that need to be knocked on. And I can tell you, and a lot of you people actually know me well enough that this may sound weird, but I actually do have some social anxiety. And when I say I'm going to go out and canvass, there's a voice in me that's just like, oh God, really? Okay. But it's actually nice, and if you go with somebody you like I've been going with Erica, it's fun because it's a nice walk. You're shooting the shit with somebody you like for a little while, and then you hit a door. But when people come out, the people who are grumpy, who don't want to talk to you, are pretty quick about it. They're not mean, they're not belligerent. They're usually and so you move on. But a lot of people do actually come out and they want to talk. And I've had some awesome conversations with my neighbor. We've been working our precinct, which is 6, which is right around our house. And we've had some really great conversations, actually starting to meet our neighbors. We've been there 20 years. And I'm like, hey, yeah, I live over across the alley, blah, blah, blah. So that's really great. So I would highly encourage, particularly those of you who actually live in the city. Hi, James. Thank you for coming. To try it once. Just try it once, and see how it goes. And it's fun, and that's what gets people out to vote. But also, money is great. So go to the website, and there's a very easy way through Act Blue, right, to make a contribution.
What is the website, Mark?
The website is www, although you don't necessarily need to put that in, .anthonyforcookcounty.org.
Great.
Easy.
Yeah.
It
If we wanted to write you a check tonight, could we do that?
Yes, you can write me a check too. The committee name is, the check will be made out to People for Anthony. People for Anthony. And yeah, thank you, Mark, so much. Again, as I mentioned, we are 45 days away from Election Day, so every dollar counts. And we want to send out 2 more mailers at the very least. So that's another $20,000 on top of staff costs, on top of other costs. Like, we need a lot more money, and we're not taking any money from developers, like my previous alderman. And we're not taking money from corporations, like my opponent. He's taking a lot of money from the corporations that he has served. And I'm only taking money from the people that I will serve. So any contribution that you can make would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Also, a shout out to Brian and Lisa.
Yeah.
I mean, I think almost everybody, there's a handful of people who don't know, they also live here. Our Picture Day studio and
Oh,
office is
really?
here, but they also, this is also their house.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, so big
Thank
shout out.
Yeah, we're in their bedroom right now.
And again, thank you for the food, so
Yes, thank you so much. So
we
good.
should eat some of it.
All right. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on, Mark. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I keep saying that.
No, I